Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back once again to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. And we're about to head into smartphone silly season, which will be followed by Black Friday and Cyber Monday and all that other craziness in the world of tech. So I think we can expect loads and loads of analysis and YouTube videos on what is the best smartphone for you. So first question I've got to ask you all, of course, is what did you think of Apple's announcement today? Did it fill you with excited? Or did it leave you feeling a little bit, meh? Now, I might be going to the Huawei launch event in Munich next week. So if there are any big questions you would like me to ask while I'm out there, apart from that Google one, of course, let me know. And also, if you're planning on upgrading, let me know what model you're choosing. And you can contact me directly by emailing me at techblogwriter@outlook.com or tweeting me, of course, at Neil C. Hughes. But enough of trivial matters like which is the best smartphone for you. We're better than that. Today, I want to explore how PlatON solves privacy and scalability problem for decentralized networks with privacy-preserving computation and verifiable computation. That was a bit of a mouthful, wasn't it? But PlatON essentially is a next-generation computing architecture that aims to facilitate secure, seamless and open data sharing for the public good. Just a few months ago in June, it was announced that PlatON would be providing the blockchain infrastructure for a smart city due for completion, I think it was in 2025, over in China. I do get to see a lot of press releases, but what caught my attention with this one is it was a true use case with real-world industrial-grade impact that also represented a new generation of blockchain startups working on tackling some of those big new issues in the industry today that we're often reading about. No longer a matter for scalability or security, PlatON is actually aiming to address wider issues of privacy with implications across enterprises, end users and regulators alike. Sounds much more interesting than a new smartphone, right? Good answer. And because you gave the right answer, I invite you to join me on a virtual trip all the way to Beijing, where we're going to speak with the Chief Strategy Officer over at PlatON. So let's find out a little more together. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Okay, my name is Ada, and I'm the CSO, which stands for the Chief Strategic Officer of this open source blockchain project, which is called PlatON. And the name actually came from the great philosopher Plato. And so our main focus are on solving the imminent privacy and scalability issues that decentralized networks are facing these days. And we do that by implementing various cryptographic algorithms, for example, multi-party computation and homomorphic encryption, to properly encrypt data before they're used for collaborative computation or sent for transactions. And we are also using verifiable computation to tackle the scalability issue. And as you might know, under the current mechanisms, computations are performed repetitively at each node in order to reach a consensus. Whereas under verifiable computations, whoever is chosen to perform the computation will then be generating a short proof, which can then be verified by other block producers. And in that way, we sort of we don't have to repeat the entire process at each node. And instead of repeating them, we can only verify the short proof, and that saves time and enhances efficiency. And that's basically our main focus is.
I'm so glad you explained to me the story behind PlatON as well, because before coming on, I was going to ask you, how do you pronounce your name and what's the story behind it? I love the fact that it was named after Plato. That's so cool, isn't it?
That's right. The founder actually is like a fan. He's very fond of the whole Western philosophical the histories and things. So and then he actually came up with this name, PlatON. I thought it was kind of cool.
Yeah, I love the fusion of the old world and the old philosophy with the new. I think it's fantastic. So, but for people tuning in and hearing about you guys for the first time, like you said there, PlatON is a next generation computing architecture that aims to facilitate secure, seamless and open data sharing, but for public good. But for some people listening, that will possibly leave them with more questions than answers. So can I ask that you set the scene and tell me a little bit more about exactly what PlatON is and the kind of problems that it solves for your customers, just to help them visualize how it would work in their world?
Right, absolutely. We do have enterprise clients from various industries, but let me just give you some examples especially in the financial industry, as this is one of the industries that's heavily regulated, and they see privacy as one of their top priorities. So in a scenario where a particular insurance company, say, wants to perform due diligence check on a particular client to prevent fraud or reverse selection, whether or not that particular person has already committed fraud in other insurance companies would be a very valuable piece of information. However, other companies that are kind of reluctant to share their own data because they are very important assets, and without proper protection, sharing means complete exposure. So in this scenario, if all the insurance company actually can collaborate and share their own data, then it would be beneficial for all. But in reality, even though they do have the incentives to do so, however, without proper technology to protect the data ownership, they don't trust each other. And so it's kind of similar to the situation in Prisoner's Dilemma. The optimal outcome is seldom achieved. So what we're doing is to equip them with cryptographic technologies that can properly encrypt their data and protect their data ownership, and which can then facilitate repeatable data collaborations and usage, and make them to actually trust, the algorithms and the mass instead of trusting any third-party sort of like facilitators. And of course, the same would apply to other scenarios. For example, commercial banks, wherein they want to perform KYC and credit checks on their customers. So basically what we're doing essentially is to maneuver data to flow so that they can generate more economical and social values than, if they're just sitting still.
Excellent. I'm curious, do you have any other examples of with this open source data marketplace and how it can actually support and incentivize individuals and indeed businesses looking to both monetize and utilize their data resources?
Many of our enterprise clients actually came to us with the same issue, and that is how to monetize their data.
Yeah.
And we all know that data is valuable, but due to commercial sensitivity and as well as the privacy regulations, we don't really have like a very good existing ideal solution for that. So I guess to me personally, there are two things that we need to tackle with before this can all happen. And the first is how to protect data ownership. So it's basically the privacy that I was talking about before. If we can protect data ownership and data privacy, then we can enable repeatable selling and usage of data. But right now, if one sells his own data, then it's exposed for good. And it's very hard to stop unauthorized secondhand reselling. So basically, once you sell your data out, it will become almost of no monetary value after. And so the second thing I think it has to be solved before we can have like a very, fluid data open market would be to determine the pricing of data. So right now, we don't really have a very lucrative free market mechanism to actually determine how much money you should be paying for one specific piece of information or data. So with the privacy-preserving technologies, we can protect data ownership and hence making data exchange and circulation more frictionless. And then the invisible hand of free market will then determine the pricing of the data and provide incentives and tools for individuals as well as businesses to actually monetize and utilize data as they need.
And another thing that caught my eye was that PlatON also addresses limitations in both scalability and security by way of verifiable computation and privacy-preserving encryption capabilities. And I believe that it's also currently enabling real-world usability across a variety of industries. I mean, you've mentioned a few, but there's also advertising, healthcare data management, IoT, decentralized AI, financial services, and so much more, as well as key management systems too. So I suspect that is the moment in this podcast where a few business leaders' ears are going to prick up and pay attention. So can you share a few more details about the difference that it's making with some real world examples, just to help them leaders visualize how it's going to work in their world?
Well, absolutely. So I will give you more examples on what we did for our clients. But I just want to first stress that as the number of smart devices grow exponentially, and there are more data being generated, and the need for peer-to-peer decentralized communication between different devices at this point is growing so fast. And we think that traditional centralized system will not be able to handle all this very complex communication at one point. And that's why we think decentralized network is definitely the infrastructure for the future. But of course, on top of that, if there are exchange of hands-off data and information, then privacy is very important. It's a key. It's basically a very key piece to the entire puzzle. And so, aside from the examples that I gave, like in the financial industries, we're also working with the healthcare industry, where collaborative computation among different DNA data centers in different jurisdictions can benefit the whole rare disease medical research or other kinds of medical research that it can be used to, for the greater good of humanity. However, DNA data is actually quite a sensitive data. It's one of the most sort of strictly regulated data, and none of the DNA data that's extracted in a particular jurisdiction shall be moved outside and used outside of that jurisdiction. That's purely for the safety of that entire nation. And so with our MPC multi-party computation solutions, as well as other encryption solutions, we can actually make the collaboration happen. So the data will never leave its local storage. Before it's used anywhere, it will be well encrypted so that only the encrypted message will send to the decentralized network for collaborative use. And only the outcome that's desired, for example, like medical research outcome, will be recorded on chain, so that all the data will be safe, and reverse engineer to extract the raw data will not be possible. And that's in the healthcare industry. And the same goes for, say, decentralized AI training. For example, for autopilot training, driving behaviors might be, commercial secrets for all the car manufacturers, the electric vehicle manufacturers. But however, they only have a piece of the entire puzzle. So if they work together with the data they collected from different jurisdictions and geographic areas, they can use the abundant data to collaboratively train a safer autopilot. And yet, with the MPC and all these privacy-preserving computation technologies, they can still protect their own data ownership. So we have use cases like this.
And I also read, I think it was back in June, that PlatON would be providing the blockchain infrastructure for a new smart city project, which I think is due for completion in 2025 over in China. But can you expand on that announcement? Because it sounds incredibly cool what you're doing there.
We were actually chosen as the backbone infrastructure for the smart city project. It's quite a big project. And basically what we'll be doing is to help them to build this infrastructure where they can gather, record, process data and information in a safer and more efficient way. So the smart city will actually based in Hangzhou, and it will be a decade-long project because building a city it requires a lot of time and resources and technologies, etc. And it should potentially have 250,000 residents living and working there in the smart city. And it will also have electric vehicle as well as green energy plants. For example, like lithium battery factories, and those will be built there. So blockchain will be used for, such as to better monitor traffic situations, to monitor the life cycle of electric vehicles, as well as lithium batteries for efficient usage. And also it could be used for managing, the waste system. So basically making the whole operations and the functionality of the smart city more efficiently, where devices can talk to each other and all the identities and information will be digitalized and recorded on chain. But then, of course, people might raise the concern over gathering information and personal data and the potential misuse of that. That's why we really need privacy-preserving algorithms to mitigate those concerns and to assure that we're not trying to mishandle any of the personal data, and that wouldn't become any issue for this smart city.
And from the outside looking in, it appears that PlatON is trying to represent this new generation of blockchain projects working on tackling some of the new issues that the industry has right now. But is that something that you set out to achieve right from the outset?
Well, we saw new decentralized networks such as blockchain will be the future infrastructure. But at first, we wasn't focusing on the privacy issue at all until we actually encountered some problems that we were asked by our clients, basically. And that's when we first sort of invested ourselves into this privacy-preserving technology. And so the most frequently asked question was, how can we protect a client's data privacy when all transactions are recorded and exposed on chain? So that's when we started to look into, cryptographic algorithms, including homomorphic encryption, multi-party encryption, etc. And we want to use those to protect data privacy for data transactions. Multi-party computation and all those algorithms can make encryption happen at the same time as we do, the computations. And we immediately know that, the privacy-preserving technologies are made for blockchain, a decentralized network. And blockchain is still at its infancy, and there are still a lot of issues that we need to solve before mass adoption can take place. And I guess privacy is definitely one of the key issues that we're facing right now.
I'm glad you mentioned privacy there, because one of my next question was going to be, can you tell me more about how PlatON aims to address those wider issues of privacy with implications across enterprises, end users, and regulators alike? Because it's so far-reaching, isn't it?
Well, of course, privacy, it's actually a very big question, and it's a very big topic. And even though we believe blockchain and privacy-preserving technologies are, the perfect fit for each other, however, cryptographic algorithms and other privacy-preserving technologies can also be applied to existing centralized systems, so it doesn't really have to work alongside with blockchain all the time. And so we can use those sort of capability to actually make current situations less prone to data breach and more secure. Encryption algorithms can be performed off-chain, and so that will be independently from the blockchain itself. And only the outcome will actually be recorded on-chain. And that's only for the authenticity purpose. So you can actually trace back and see, what is the original outcome, and to make sure that is authentic. And I guess right now we see rising public concerns over personal data security, and there are lawsuits against, data abuse. And we also see regulators scrutinizing internet companies for mishandling of their client data. And I certainly believe that with proper privacy-preserving measures, those problems can be solved, and it will continue to be the trend as the public become more and more aware of their rights to it and their entitlement to their own data, so that privacy-preserving technology will definitely be, something that we should focus more on.
We've already mentioned so many cool things already that you guys are doing, but I also read that Mercedes-Benz China recently joined PlatON for blockchain used car data. Can you tell listeners a little bit more about that for anyone that missed that story? Because, again, it's incredibly cool what you're doing here and doing things differently.
Right. So we're actually experimenting with the sales department on, the used car market. And we're building this pilot project for them. And then we actually joined the accelerator, and that's why we have this announcement made just like a week ago. So basically what we're trying to do with them is to build a second-hand trading platform for car buyers, sellers, and dealers, as well as maintenance service providers. Everyone will actually join the same one shared ledger. And that ledger will actually be used to record information, including mileage, maintenance record, as well as any accident reports, and so on and so forth. So that we can actually use all this data to better and more accurately calculate the very dynamic residual value of used cars. We can use this system to actually replace the existing second-hand car market in China, which is quite fragmented. And so this can potentially make the market more efficient by eliminating information mismatch between the dealers and the buyers, as well as the dealers and the sellers, so that we can actually, whether it's the seller of the car or the buyer who's looking for, buying a car, can have more information as to how to price the vehicle, so that they don't really have to get ripped off, which is often happens these days.
And it seems to me as well that you seem to be ticking all the right boxes in this industry, because many of the challenges, such as real-world use cases, adoption and partnerships, you're ticking all those boxes already. So I've got to ask, what are your biggest challenges right now, and what is next for PlatON on the horizon?
Well, I mean, if you look at blockchain, it has a decade of history, a decade long of history, but yet we still think it's quite new, especially when we are trying to push for adoption with, our enterprise clients. They still have so many questions, and whether it's the performance or scalability, there are still a lot of issues that we need to tackle before, blockchain can actually be accepted for a more general use. When we're talking about the privacy-preserving technologies, even though it's not exactly like a new concept that we invented these years, but the process to develop those and to actually make them into mature and generic enterprise solutions for easy and user-friendly adoption will not be an easy task either. We are starting with working with clients, and we're working on more customized solutions first. And we're also gradually open sourcing our codes to the community so that we can hopefully attract more talents and attentions and for people to work on this field together and to expedite the advancement of such technologies. And in the future, we'll continue to work on the privacy-preserving solutions and eventually probably introduce dedicated hardware to further enhance the performance. But I guess for us, we're prepared. We think we still have a long way to go before the whole blockchain and privacy-preserving computation to actually become mainstream. We have confidence. We're sure that this will be the future.
Excellent. So for anyone listening that would like to find out more information about anything that we've talked about today, because we have covered a lot of ground, can you just remind them of the best way to find you online or contact your team or join your community and liaise with them too?
Of course. So for anyone, if you are interested, you can find us on our website, which is platon.network. And you can also follow us on Twitter at platon_network, as well as, looking for us on GitHub at PlatON Network and with no space in between.
Fantastic. Well, like I said a few moments ago, one of the things that really stands out for me here is I cover a lot of different blockchain projects in the industry, but you're ticking all the right boxes with real world use cases, adoption and partnerships. But more than anything, just a big thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to come and share that story with me today. So thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you very much, Neil.
So through Privacy-Preserving Computation, PPC, PlatON is breaking down data silos and enabling secure data exchanges and collaborative computing for enterprise users. And with its open source data marketplace, PlatON also supports and incentivizes individuals and businesses looking to both monetize and utilize their data resources. And PlatON addresses limitations in scalability and security by way of verifiable computation and privacy-preserving encryption capabilities. And why is that important? Because it's enabling real-world usability across a wide variety of global industries, including advertising, healthcare data management, IoT and decentralized AI, financial services, as well as key management systems too. So it sounds to me like they're attacking that adoption issue that we keep talking about head on too. But what are your thoughts, insights, expertise? I'm quite conscious that many of you listening will spend a lot more time in this area than I do. I'm more of a generalist that will tackle a different industry and a different technology every single day. But this could be your area of expertise. And if it is, there's an open invite for you to come on this podcast if you'd like to talk about it some more. Or equally, you can send me a quick email or tweet about everything that you've heard and your opinions on what you've heard today. So my email address is techblogwriter@outlook.com, or you can tweet me at Neil C. Hughes. So keep those thoughts coming in, and yes, you can tell me what smartphone you think is best and why. Whatever it is you'd like to talk about, my door is open to each and every one of you. So a big thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.